early public response to Monet was so hostile that it seems to us, looking back, to be virtually inexplicable. We not only got Monet wrong, but we got him wrong for a long time. And in the history of art, it ranks as one of the great mistakes. Now, I don't know when the first Monet was acquired by a public gallery in this country. I haven't had time to dive into the catalogue, and the catalogue may well have a look at that issue. But the Felton Bequest in Melbourne bought Rough Weather, which is hanging downstairs, in 1913, which was not a disgraceful time to be buying a Monet anywhere in the world. But it was another 35 years before this gallery bought its Monet, which is also hanging downstairs. By that time, 1949, a great shift in public taste had occurred, and the 60 years since have seen Monet essentially beatified. He's one of the painter saints now, and every picture, perhaps a little too easily, is accepted as a miracle. Now, let me confess that I am not here tonight as an expert on Monet. I was asked to come tonight and reflect on what connections there may be and what lessons there may be for us now in the reception of Monet and the recent troubles experienced by Bill Henson, which I have been investigating and writing about. Because it seems to me that we are now in the midst of, I keep thinking it's dying down and it keeps blazing up again, that we are in the midst of the greatest hullabaloo about art in this country for at least half a century. It puts the controversy over Piss Christ in Melbourne absolutely into the shade. It makes Helen Demidenko look like a bit part. It's the big one. Nothing bigger, I think, since Ern Malley during the war years. And that delicious and perfect sting did not carry the huge emotional charge that the debate about Bill Henson is carrying. I suppose the easy lesson would be to connect these two artists is simply that the public can be wrong. But I take that to be too easy a lesson. And I think there are two lessons, deeper lessons, behind what's happened in the last few months that it's useful perhaps to reflect on. The first is this: not liking Monet and not liking Henson are equally questions of taste. To say this doesn't in any way trivialise that response. On the contrary, it reminds us how passionate we are about taste. Taste is not just a matter of aesthetics, it's morals and aesthetics. It's values deeply embedded in us. A strong sense of what we are ourselves, of ourselves, is tied up in questions of taste. It's why we're so passionate about it. Early on the morning of May the 23rd this year, the Prime Minister found himself, not unexpectedly, in the Channel 9 studio at a little after 7 o'clock in the morning on the Today Show. And he was shown on a television monitor 5 images from Bill Henson's exhibition, which had been shut down the night before by the police. These 5 images were shown to him for a total of a little under 20 seconds, and 3 of the 5 were defaced by large black bars. The screen was partly filled by the headline that said something like, "Child Porn Art Outrage," words to that effect. And after a little under 19 seconds, I've timed it many times, the Prime Minister said, after a little prompting from the interviewer, "I find them absolutely revolting. Kids deserve to have the innocence of their childhood protected. I have a very deep view of this. For God's sake, let's just allow kids to be kids. Whatever the artistic view or the merits of that sort of stuff, frankly, I don't think there are any. Just allow kids to be kids." Now, this was a statement of taste. Now, the thing about taste we tend to forget in this country is that just because we feel it passionately doesn't make it a universal truth. Judgments of taste are true for us and not for everyone. Judgments of taste change. In the course of investigating the Henson business, I found myself in Canberra talking to some of the senior police who were engaged in a thing called Operation Centurion, which, at exactly the same time all of this was going on, was one of the biggest, most dramatic and effective hauls of child pornography in this country. And one of those policemen said to me, firstly, he said, if anybody thinks Henson's pictures are pornography, they should look at what we deal with. But he also said, there's a strange thing about Australia. We mess up the categories. I said, what do you mean by categories? And he said, well, look, there are 3 categories as far as we're concerned. There are things we just don't like. And then there are things which need to be classified by the classification board, films, television shows, publications. And then there are things that need to be forbidden by law, child pornography, for instance. He said, in his observation, Australians can't keep themselves in their right categories. We really, really dislike something passionately, and that's not enough for us. We want to see it banned. We want to see somebody punished. We want to hurt somebody about it. We want to see it stopped. He sees it, this policeman said, it's very much a matter of categories. And we forget these judgments of taste, passionate as they are, don't require enforcement by the police. I think that's the first lesson. Passionate questions of taste felt as deeply true, but that we need to understand tastes differ, tastes change, and tastes can't, in a society like ours, be properly imposed on other people. That is not for a moment for me to claim that anybody has to like a single photograph of Bill Henson's. I'm not saying that for a moment. Nor am I saying that you're a Philistine if you don't like the photographs of Bill Henson. You can have the most refined taste and be deeply troubled by his photographs. That's fine, but it's a judgment of taste. The second lesson, I think, is this, that we have to be very wary of calls for artists to change what they do to meet community taste. John Armstrong, I'm not sure who John Armstrong is, I think he may be a philosopher of some kind, writing in The Australian late last week, revealed that he had been called in by the New South Wales police to advise them on the difference between art and pornography at the height of what I call the first round of Henson. Round 1 of Henson is shutting down the exhibition, raiding the exhibition, taking away the pictures, and then the police, of course, finding that there were no grounds whatever to charge Henson, returning the pictures, exhibition reopens. That's round 1. Round 2 is Art Monthly in July. Round 3, alas, in part provoked by me, is just dying down at the moment over the visit to the school. But in round 1, John Armstrong was asked to advise the police on a very difficult question, the difference between art and porn. And in this interesting article he wrote about this, which was published last Friday, Armstrong talked about Goethe not publishing a couple of poems in his lifetime for fear of offending good people. And Armstrong approved of this. Henson should follow Goethe's example, he said. I'm happy to believe that Henson sincerely did not intend offence, that his enthusiasm for pubescent bodies is asexual, and that he has not harmed any of his subjects. But the fact that a great many profoundly decent people hate what he has done should carry weight. He should sacrifice his artistic project in this area to consideration for Goethe's good people. He should stop photographing children and concentrate on other valuable and beautiful works. I don't agree. I could not disagree more. Now, I don't believe that artists have any special privileges to break the law. Now, we can quibble about the laws, but my view is that they are not privileged to be pornographers. They are not privileged to exploit their models, men or women, adults or children, that they have obligations to the community set down in law. And once those obligations are met, the rest is their obligation to art. In July, when the Art Monthly business, let me begin slightly differently. In this gallery, in 2003, there was held the first round of the Citigroup Private Bank Australian Photographic Portrait Prize. It only ran for a few years, but in the first round, one of the pictures hanging in that exhibition, held at the same time as the Archibald, was a photograph by Papetru, a Melbourne photographer, of her little daughter Olympia in a takeoff, really, of a famous photograph by Lewis Carroll of a naked girl sitting in front of the White Cliffs of Dover. That picture hung in the exhibition here utterly without controversy. It didn't win the prize, but it was loved sufficiently by Citigroup Private Bank to be reproduced on a set of greeting cards which the bank gave to favoured customers. The picture was then exhibited in Bendigo, New York, Melbourne, Adelaide, Montreal and Perth. A copy of the picture was sold at Christie's. It was reproduced in catalogues and art journals and in The Australian one weekend in 2003, all without controversy. But when it appeared on the cover of Art Monthly, the Sunday Telegraph and then the politicians of this country went berserk. Rudd called it revolting. He insisted once again that children shouldn't be put through the torture, or shouldn't be put through the experience of modelling in this way. He expressed a profound judgment of taste that he did not like this kind of thing. And a picture that had never caused a ripple of discontent or a ripple of controversy was suddenly the centre of a huge national uproar and being condemned on all sides as an invitation to paedophilia, as a degradation of the child, as placing all children in Australia in danger, as a profound mistake on the part of the parents of Olympia. The father, Robert Nelson, is the art critic of The Age. He painted the backdrop. Polixeni Papetru took the photographs. It was, again, a huge uproar. In response to that uproar, oh, by the way, I should add, the classification board looked at the magazine and said it was absolutely fine. They gave it an M rating. It can be sold anywhere with a warning sticker on the front. Gorgeously, they not only had to rate the front cover, they had to rate the back cover as well, which was an advertisement for the big exhibition of Pacific photography at the National Gallery, which was being held at around that time. There was an Indonesian man on the back cover with no shirt on, so he had to be as carefully classified as little Olympia sitting with her legs crossed in front of the painted White Cliffs of Dover on the front. Magazine, fine. Not pornographic, not illegal, did not break the law. But the response of the Rudd government was to direct the Australia Council to work out some protocols which would apply in future to any institution or artist that receives council funding whenever children are depicted in their work or hung in their exhibitions or published in their publications. And that process is now going ahead. There will be, the Australia Council has said, no council for funding unless the rights of children are protected by the artists, unless everyone viewing the artwork has an appropriate understanding of the nature and artistic content of the material, unless the children are protected from exploitation, which is to include the wrongful use of images beyond the original context of the creative work. And at the same time, the Australia Council is insisting that its statutory role upholding and promoting the right of people to freedom in the practice of the arts be acknowledged as well. Now, The Australia Council is now looking at these questions, and the questions are enormous. What does the depiction of a child mean? Will they be concerned with all depictions of any child, or only realistic depictions of children? Will it involve children clothed or children naked? If the latter, how do you define naked? What are the rights of children? Do the rights of children include the right to choose to be photographed by Bill Henson or Polixeni Papetru? What is exploitation? Is exploitation posing, say, for a photograph or modelling, say, for a painting that will one day be sold on the art market? Is the fact that a work of art will be sold mean that the model was exploited? If it doesn't, what is fair payment for a model, for a photograph? What is fair payment for a model when being painted or sculpted? How can images be corralled from the net? How can any artist or institution undertake to make sure that a picture on their wall does not somehow reach the internet? If you know how to use them, and I don't really know how to use mine, that can take a photograph in this gallery. Now, that would be very wrong, and I don't want anybody to do it, but you can. You can take a photograph easily and quietly with your telephone, and you can put it on the internet. How can any artist or any institution guarantee that that will not happen? All big questions, and public funding will depend on providing some kind of guarantee for those questions. But the biggest of those questions is the notion that artists and institutions must make sure that the public has appropriate understanding of the works that they're coming to see. I had thought that this simply meant that there might be a warning on the door saying the material in here is a bit R-rated, or the material in here may offend children, or the material in here may disturb viewers, something like that. But it is not. It is intended to go much further than that. In the Australia Council at the moment, they do not know how much further they intend it to go, because, of course, this is an astonishing minefield. How would Monet have gone in, say, 1900 if you said to Monet, or if you said to this gallery, you can't get any funding, federal funding, for a Monet exhibition unless you can undertake that everybody coming to see the exhibition will have an appropriate understanding of the nature of the work? To my mind, these are extremely troubling ideas. This little magazine, Art Monthly, broke no law. The photographs in it, the photograph especially on the cover, was uncontroversial. The response of the federal government has been to call for these fresh protocols. It was not their only response. In what I take to be a fit of astonishing pique, the Department of Foreign Affairs cancelled its subscription to Art Monthly to make sure that this magazine doesn't turn up in the waiting rooms of our embassies abroad and so dishonour the country by representing us as being, for instance, deeply thoughtful about modern art. You can understand the government's point of view there. You wouldn't want to misrepresent Australia, would you? You wouldn't want to misrepresent the great mainstream of Australia. Now, later this month, the Australia Council will be publishing draft protocols along these lines. I would just like to urge you all, as lovers of art, to make sure that you read these draft protocols and examine how you feel about them and what their impact might be on the arts. I know that the Australia Council, the last thing on their wish list is to become a policeman of the arts in this country. I know that the last thing they remotely want is to limit in any way the freedom of artists in this country. But this is the role they have been assigned, setting out these protocols. Please look at them carefully. The press will be writing about them. They'll be up on the websites of the Australia Council, and there will be a fresh round of submissions and discussion about these protocols once the drafts appear. Australia has a history of these arts hullabaloos blowing over. Usually they leave wreckage of one kind or another behind. Max Harris was essentially, though he never lost his energy, his verve, Max Harris was essentially destroyed by the Ern Malley hoax during the war. And the great controversy surrounding Bill Dobell, which erupted, of course, in this gallery, in an exhibition here in the Archibald Prize, left Bill Dobell physically wrecked for a time, but once he recovered, he was both combative and fashionable, and he was never as good a painter again. He never painted a picture, in my view, as good as the one that caused the fuss in that Archibald Prize. I asked Bill Henson how he's going to go after all of this fuss. Is he still going to photograph children? Is he still going to be, is he going to change his practice in any way? And he said he wasn't. And I said, but you'll have people like Hetty Johnson at your, won't you sort of mentally, in your own mind, have sort of Hetty Johnson at your elbow every time you go to the camera? And he said, she can be sitting on my head for all I care. It's not going to change what I do. But time will tell what kind of damage this kind of hullabaloo does to a great artist. This country's best known, most honoured photographer, whose work has been controversial for a long time, but who has never been exposed to these successive waves of abuse and hostility. He's a calm, thoughtful man, confident of the necessity of art and of his own talent. My hopes are that he will get through this pretty much unscathed, but only time will tell. And only time will tell if we're embarking on an exercise through the Australia Council which will see the Prime Minister's taste imposed on us all. Thank you.